Well, welcome everybody to the Dan Gomer Show. Lori, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for
I'm really
having
excited to have you here today and share your inspirational story. So I'm just going to jump right into it, though. And I know you had to think about this a little bit, but who's one person that really inspired you in your life that helped you, I don't know, make positive change in your life?
Yeah, so it was a hard question because I feel guilty giving all of that credit to one person. But I would say that it is two, and those were my mom's mom, my grandma, and then she passed away when I was 5. And after her, it was my dad's dad, my grandpa, and he just passed away 5 years ago. And both of them saw me for who I was and really saw me, and I knew that. And neither of them ever introduced limitations to me. Not from like a parental or a guidance perspective, but like limitations in life.
Right.
And they both basically made me feel as though I could conquer the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We all need people like that. So we're going to get a little bit more into your story here in just a sec. So we'll do a little housekeeping here, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Who's somebody that influenced your life? Like, this is a really interesting question to me. Mm-hmm. We actually had a conversation about, some influences I've had in my life. But I'd love to hear who influenced you and why. So put that in the comments. If you're new to the show, type new. If you've watched it, type didn't watch. I'd like to hear who's coming back and who's new. And if you know anybody that you think would be a good fit for the show, let me know, because I want to have more people like Lori on, just sharing their stories. So let's just kind of jump into it. Going back to what you were just talking about with your grandparents. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that their influence in your life, impacted what you've been able to accomplish so far?
Without a doubt. I mean, I believe that every human at our core wants to matter. And when people feel as though they matter, the sky's the limit. And all of a sudden, all of the negative shadow that lives within us and all that self-critic just gets quiet because we matter. And when we matter, we want to do something good. And everybody wants that innately. And so both of them provided that for me consistently, always, unconditionally. And that kind of led me to want to spread that to everybody else I ever came in contact with. And I feel like that's exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've been doing a great job, and we haven't known each other for a long time, but I knew the first time I had met you and the first time I heard you speak that you were really in integrity with a mission and a goal. You were able to take a really challenging situation and turn it into something that's empowering for you and for people around you. And I think that for me, that's what was so inspiring and why I was like, okay, we've got to do this. We've got to do this interview and talk a little bit more. But can you tell everyone who's watching a little bit about your story and all that?
Absolutely. So to sum it up, Cliff's Notes version, when I was 3 years old in 1983, I was playing in my front yard. I lived in a pretty rundown neighborhood, but we were a village. Everybody lived together. Everybody that lived there worked there. We lived across the street from my dad's work. And at like 12:30 in the afternoon, my brother and I, among many, many, many other people, were outside. And my dad had gone inside because we suckered him into getting us a popsicle, and he had gone inside to get my brother and I one. And while he was inside, a car drove up and asked, the passenger door was open, and the guy inside asked if I liked candy. And like any sugar-loving 3-year-old, I said yes. And he said if I went with him that he would give me candy. And so I got in the car, and it was just like seconds, and we were gone. And there were a lot of eyewitnesses. It was the middle of the summer, it was the middle of the day, just a really bold move. And then he took me up to Chief Hosa exit up I-70, right past Genesee, and he found an abandoned outhouse there. And he proceeded to severely abuse me. And then he put me in the pit of a 15-foot outhouse toilet down below the ground and left me for dead. And so that's where like I kind of proved my resiliency, and I built myself this little seat that I was able to sit on, and my feet only my feet were in the water and the chemicals that they put in those things to biodegrade. And so that saved my life, because had I been standing or sitting, I would have died of poisoning right away. And then I was below ground, 15 feet. So if I would have been above ground, I would have died the first night from hypothermia. So there was like a lot of miracles in all of it. And 4 days later, I was still crying for my parents, and bird watchers happened to be driving by. And
it was 4 days?
3.5, almost a full 4 days. And on the fourth day, these bird watchers were using the facilities, and they heard this cry, and they started looking around, and eventually they looked down and they asked what I was doing there, and I told them that I lived there, which again also speaks to resiliency and strength for a child to kind of adopt, well, this is my new normal, and that's what kids do, you know, they adapt. And so I was reunited with my family a few hours later. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey. Like that experience was so traumatizing, not just to myself, but to everybody in my family, in my community, in my neighborhood, but then a lot of people in the Denver metro area and across the state and across the country, and even some people internationally. And it was just the beginning, you know? And so I've spent a lifetime adapting, trying to continuously monitor and manage the reactions that have led from that.
So how were you able to do that? What are some of the tools that you've been able to adopt that have allowed you to adapt? Because, you know, in the middle of your story where you would have every right to say, you know, woe is me, this is jacked up, therefore I'm going to go hurt others or do whatever, right? Yeah. You said, well, there was a miracle there, and then there was adaptability there, and there was all of these empowering words. That doesn't happen by accident.
Sure.
You know, how have you been able to make those changes?
Yeah. You know, I know that I'm an empath by nature, and so I would imagine that there's some of that plays a role. And I also think that there was a lot of communication about my experience. So my parents raised me to live a normal life. They didn't move right away. We moved like 6 years later. 7 years later. So they didn't move right away. They didn't put bars on the windows. They didn't, you know, change our lives. They just carried on with life. In some ways that was really, really helpful. In other ways that was challenging, right? Like I'm sure they just did the best that they could, because as parents, we're just doing the best we can. Right. I've never done it before.
Right. And it was traumatizing for them too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so I would say that to answer your question, the biggest things for me were knowing what it felt like to be alone, and knowing what it felt like to be different, and never wanting anybody to ever hurt the way that I had, ever. I never wanted to cause that kind of harm. And that doesn't mean that there weren't a lot of really bad days, because there's been a lot of really bad days. And it doesn't mean that it hasn't been easy, because I'm, 36 years out and I still struggle with it. There's still things that are triggering on a regular basis. And I just, every day, try and be intentional and thoughtful and mindful, and try and do good by the world.
I love the word intentional.
Yeah.
Intentional, because that comes from being mindful.
Yeah.
You can't have intention without being mindful.
Absolutely.
And it is a daily practice, and it's not it's not easily attained, but
Right.
it is attainable for anybody who decides that they want that's what they want
Absolutely.
in their life. And I think for me, that's part of what's been so inspiring, about your story, is that you made that decision. That I understand there's good days, I understand that there's bad days, but I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leverage it to make the world a better place.
For sure.
So you should be proud of what you've accomplished.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So where did that drive and that motivation, where do you think that stemmed from? Why didn't you just say, life sucks and it's cruel and it's mean, I'm out of here?
Yeah, I think that one thing that my grandmother, my mom's mom, taught me when I was little was that I have a spark. And I knew very, very early on that I had this light inside. And now I call that light my instinct. And I think every child, every person, we raise our children to kind of ignore that instinct a little bit in a lot of ways, right? We have to get them to follow social norms.
Right,
so they have to behave in a classroom with one teacher and 30 people, so it's like we kind of trim that in a little bit. And then when they're 18, they go off and then they spend the next 20 years trying to figure out what to do. And then it's usually later in life that they find that light, that they find that instinct, and they're like, wait a minute. And that's where midlife crisis comes into play. For me, I always knew that was there. And I've always danced with trying to take care of other people while attending to my light. And that's been, sometimes I fall over and sometimes they fall over, but that's been the dance. And I think that instinct and that internal drive comes from believing that anything is really possible. I just have to pick my course and go that way. And I'm probably going to have to take a right turn every so often.
Right, or left. Listen to your instinct.
Or turn around.
Yeah. So what if there's somebody else that, because here's the thing. One thing that I've learned is that, I didn't go through what you went through. Sure. The stuff that I went through, one could say is much less challenging or whatever. But at the end of the day, the stories that I make up about myself and the stories you make up about yourself, those are identical, right?
Yep,
They're very similar how we turn our life experiences into these big monsters, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So for somebody out there that's watching, do you have any advice for them as to how they can create real lasting change in their life?
Yeah. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to follow your light and to follow your instinct. When I was 25, I met my adult person, and her name is Meg, and she continuously asks me not to give her credit for this experience, but it was almost like the toothpaste coming out of the tube. You just can't put it back in, right? Once it's out, it's out. Yeah. And so once I experienced that kind of relationship, and I had many other relationships like that throughout my life, I just never got it. But once I got that, all I wanted to do was surround myself with people that were like that.
Yeah.
And those were people that were empowering. They believed in me. I believed in them. It was reciprocal. And they were charging forward, wanting to be. I oftentimes use the slogan, if you can, you do. And I just want to surround. Yeah, right? Yeah, like Yoda. Yeah, do or do not. There is no try. And so I just have, my biggest advice to anybody would be, if you can, do. Mm-hmm. And surround yourself with people that are empowering and not with people that hurt you. Yeah. Right? So
that's great advice.
Thanks.
That's really good advice. So, all right. So another thing that I've noticed about you is you're very high energy.
Yeah, I am.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Do you have you've got EndCAN, which is your nonprofit, and we'll talk about that next. And you've got a practice, a therapy practice.
I do motivational speaking. I'm writing a book. I have a movie coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you? Where do you get all the energy to do all this stuff?
Yeah. I don't know that answer, except that like I'm just trying to be intentional. I think the energy comes from like the intention that I want to be impactful, and I am really practicing saying no and knowing where my limits are. And that means like my work right now in my life is about self-care, because I've really attended to everybody else and making sure that everybody else in the world, my clients and my audiences and my kids and, you know, everybody, all my relationships, everybody was attended to. And then all of a sudden I started getting sick and I started struggling and having surgeries and all of these things. And my reset is me.
Yeah.
And that's been a journey, and I'm like proud and honored to be able to say like, I need a minute. And the energy comes because I've surrounded myself with people who help me be successful. And so I'm a really good delegator now. And
That helps a lot.
it really does.
That helps a lot.
And, you know, while I wish I could help the world, I can't help anybody if I'm not strong and stable. And so that's another dance. It's another balancing act that I have to continuously monitor and put myself in check. And that's why great friends around me are like, you might want to say no to this one,
Right.
you know, or whatever.
I'm kind of the same way. I have a problem saying no. But
Yeah.
So do you have like a daily routine or something, you know,
Yeah.
that just kind of keeps you at least in the right frame of mind when
For
you start
sure.
your day?
Yeah, you know, so I am 7 months into a really cool, beautiful program that has helped me kind of find my light. And I do a daily meditation through that every day. And then I meet with a coach, 2 different coaches once a week. And then I do some sort of body movement, whether that's like an aerobic, like CrossFit. I've just begun that. And then, or like a stretching or yoga. And that's been my daily, just through this last realization of like, wait a minute, I've been sick for a number of years and I need to take care of myself.
Yep.
So I've been really introducing all of those concepts into my life. And then I continuously listen. I'll do fiction, nonfiction in my book reads. Sometimes I listen, sometimes I read, but I am consistently moving those in and out, one for pleasure, one for gain, one for pleasure, one for gain. And so every day I read, and every day I connect with at least 5 people in my world that I absolutely love.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Good for you.
That's my goal.
That's a great routine. Yeah, I've got a few of those things, but I like that. Connecting with at least 5 people every day.
Yeah.
So let's talk about EndCAN a little bit.
Yeah.
EndCAN.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about what EndCAN is.
Yeah.
And how we can get more info and that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah, so EndCAN stands for the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. So CAN is Child Abuse and Neglect. And 8 years ago, I asked Dr. Richard Krugman, who was then the dean of CU Med School, to be my mentor. He was the treating doctor at the Kemp Center when I went to the Kemp Center right after my kidnapping for forensic interviewing. Mm-hmm. And he said yes to be my mentor. And every conversation we had was about his experience in the medical profession. He's been a pediatrician for 50 plus years, and he has been able to proudly see the improvement of hundreds and hundreds of different issues and diseases and disorders and things like that across the medical realm. So there was a national foundation for every disease, every form of cancer, every body part, and 20 different genes. And those foundations help that issue improve in changing the conversation to educate people, prevention, finding research, the necessary research in order to either ameliorate it, cure it, or treat it, and then advocacy, either changing laws or just being a voice for that issue. And then there's been a national foundation for many other things like smoking, LGBT, AIDS, a variety of things. Excuse me. And there's nothing like that for child abuse and neglect.
Which is shocking.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, when you said that, when I heard you speak, I was thinking to myself, there's no way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we did the same thing. We were like, well, I don't know. I mean, we might want to find out. And so we spent 7 months traveling across the country, meeting with existing national organizations in the child abuse field, like Prevent Child Abuse America. They do phenomenal work, and their primary focus is home visiting, which is exceptional. It's a beautiful prevention model for child abuse. Their statistics are out of this world, but that's all they focus on. And that's great, because you can only do so much, right? And so, but there's nobody that's like representing the whole field and being the voice to the larger population of people, bringing everybody together, sharing information. There's nobody doing that. So we decided, why not us? Yeah. and that was like a big decision. So we
maybe bigger than you thought.
Yeah, way bigger. Yeah. And a year and a half ago, we got our 501c3 status and have just been working uphill ever since.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So really quickly, and it's EndCAN.com, right?
EndCAN.org.
Okay, sorry.
It's a nonprofit.
All right, just real quick, and then we'll get into the rapid fire questions.
Yeah, great.
All right. You're having a movie made.
I am having a movie made.
All right, who called you about that?
So there's been a number of people, but
if you can share, maybe you can share.
I don't know that I can. Share. Well, so
is it happening?
It's happening. We're doing a press release tomorrow.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna stop there.
It's a big secret.
I won't
But it's cool. So I've been approached about a movie. I have a screenwriter that's happening, and the whole intention for the movie is to be a voice for possibility, not be another thriller, crazy story. There's a difference between being a story and changing the conversation. And
so the intention is to change the conversation.
I want to be really intentional with it, and we want to change the conversation.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right. Well, hopefully I didn't.
No, you're good. It's all good. We shared nothing.
All right. Perfect. All right. So you ready for the rapid fire?
Ready.
Then? Okay. Well, this is kind of a funny first question then. What's one movie that you can quote from beginning to end?
Oh, Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. All right, if you could travel back in time one time, where would you go and what event or thing or whatever?
It would be the 20s, because I love to dance, and the 20s was really about this fun flapper move, a little sassy and classy.
Yeah.
I love that for sure.
That's awesome.
And I always had fun beverages and big long cigarettes. Not that I would necessarily smoke, but it just was cool, right?
It just cool idea.
It's ridiculous, but whatever.
I think it's awesome. If you could ask one piece of advice from any historical figure, who would you ask and what would you ask them?
It would be to Lincoln, and it would be, and for me it would be what empowered you to ignore your own needs in order to do good by others. And I feel like he really, really did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. What book or books, you said you read a lot, have you given out the most as gifts or recommended the most or?
Yeah, so.
Top one. I need a good book to read. Boom.
The Alchemist and the Celestine Prophecy.
I like that one. What was the last one?
The Celestine Prophecy.
Okay.
Yeah, in order. Alchemist, then Celestine.
Are they linked?
No, not at all. And then it would be The Road Less Traveled. If you want to do some serious spiritual self-improvement work, start with The Alchemist, do the Celestine Prophecy, and then read The Road Less Traveled, especially as a parent.
Yeah, awesome. That's great advice. The Art of Letting Go would be a good one to throw in there.
That's a really good one.
That in there
The Power of Now is another exceptional one.
I
could go on.
All right. If I offered to buy you a plane ticket anywhere in the world, but you had to leave tomorrow morning, where would you go?
Fiji.
Fiji. Nice.
I love the beach, and I love warmth, and I like quiet.
Yeah.
And I've never been there, but I see all these pictures, and I want to go there. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Lori, thank you so much for that's it. We're
cool.
done.
Thanks. Nice job. You did great right here.
You did
Woo!
great. Appreciate you coming out, know, and being so open and honest, and for really trying to make a difference in the world. And every time we sit down and talk, I always feel much more elevated. You know?
I do
So
that
what
to
you're
people.
doing is working. So
Cool.
keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you guys. And remember the question was, one person that influenced
person,
you
yeah.
and what they did to influence your life. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. If you know anybody that wants to be a guest on the show, I'd love to hear from them as well. So thanks for watching. Lori, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a great day.
Take care.